Okay, so welcome to the June 29th, 2010 special meeting. We have no non-agenda item public speakers, so please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. Ready, begin. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, I'd like to welcome everyone present today and those watching the broadcast and call the June 29th, 2010 special meeting to order with all board members present. The board welcomes your comments in writing or during public testimony. Public testimony request forms are located on the tables to my right, inside the front and back entrances to the auditorium. The board asks that speakers focus their comments on issues and not on individuals. Acceptance of public testimony requests will be closed as each agenda item is called and our discussion begins. Board members and the superintendent are interested in your comments, and staff will be responding to the issues that we hear today. If you wish to address the board today and your name is not on the blue sheet located at both entrances to the auditorium, and you've not already submitted a request for public testimony form, please complete the form and submit it to Ms. Ward. Speakers on agenda items will be called on to speak during the discussion of the agenda items. Okay, so we will begin actually with item A3. This is the ratification of the employment contract for the district superintendent of San Diego Unified School District. Can we get a motion?
Move for approval.
We got fight for second.
I said motion. Second first.
All right. Got a motion and a second.
Comment.
Oh, comments. There
okay.
We go. Okay.
Yeah, I just want to point out to the public that this is a no-frills contract. It does not include any bonuses or anything like that. And it also subjects the superintendent to the same budget restraints of the rest of the district, including the salary reductions that are a result of the furlough days, which is the same for all employees in the district as part of his contract to follow the same as everybody else. So I just wanted to point that out.
I'd like to point out that we have actually have someone at the helm that I think is going to be able to lead us through some rough waters and make sure that we make it into our home port on the other side, just keeping with the Admiral.
Very nice poetic metaphors.
Thank you, Bill, for accepting the contract and without, without any, you just accepted the contract. I really appreciate that. Thank you.
Great, thank you. So please vote. Okay, the motion passes 4-0. On to administrative assignments, and I'll just report out first. This is the appointment formally of Bill Koba from interim superintendent to superintendent effective July 1st, and that passed on a vote of 4-0 with one abstention. And then, Superintendent, would you like to report out on the other administrative assignments?
Yes, thank you, President Barrera. We have administrative appointments as follows. Matthew Hayes to Program Manager, Content Area Social Studies in the Student Program and Professional Learning Office. Deborah Higdon to Program Manager, Content Area English Language Arts, Student Program and Professional Learning Office. Sally Viavata from Vice Principal Stanley Middle School to Principal Bird Rock Elementary School. Donald Wisman to Program Manager, Content Area Social Studies, Student Program and Professional Learning Office. And finally, Cheryl Lawson from Resource Teacher to Program Manager, Content Area Mathematics, Student Program and Professional Learning Office.
Move group one.
I think this is just a report out.
Oh, yeah, okay. Well, don't we vote publicly?
No.
We just report out on the vote we took in closed session. Okay. Great. Thank you, Superintendent. On to item A5. This is the Accountability Office organizational structure. We've got one speaker on this item, David Page. David.
My name is David Page. I'm the District Advisory Council Chairperson for San Diego City Schools. I still live at 9393 Angwin Place in San Diego. I have just a few other questions. I can't get any information out of the documents we've had so far. If this document is the change also of the removal of the Executive Director of Federal and Special Programs, and then the creation of the Accountability Office Executive Director. From the job description for the Executive Director of the State and Federal Programs, there was an inclusion of a statement that said that person was to plan, organize, control, and direct federal, state, central services and programs. I'm wondering where in this document we're going to find the planning and organizing and controlling of these services and programs. Also, where will we now find providing leadership, coordinating the process of writing and revising of the district's LEA plan? Where we're going to find the provision of direction for program and fiscal planning, plan and development and budgeting, staffing and implementation and evaluation of assigned programs, and where do we find the provision for oversight of the advisory councils at the district level? I've not seen those things. But what I have seen are some other things that aren't necessarily mentioned. What I see in the introduction of this item to the board is that the purpose here was to separate, for the purposes of integrity, the two departments, into two departments, and yet one of the largest programs we have happening here in San Diego Unified under I-21 doesn't fall under this document at all. Can you tell me where does the I-21 program report to this accountability manager to make sure that the process is actually working? Because what I see in the document that was approved by you previously was that they formed their own committee that's appointed by invitation from the leader of this document or this program, and so the program monitors itself, which is what I thought you were trying to avoid. So how do we get P or I-21 underneath the same accountability measures so that we have good data? The other thing is in the structure that we see for the MAC office, I see that there's still resource teachers under ARRA, and yet the I-20 program had Title I teachers working across the district in non-Title I schools. Why aren't we using the Title I money for these Title I people, and why are we less concerned about the number of resource teachers overseeing school site councils than we are for the I-21, which is supposed to be ARA-type funds that come, train, and leave? Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Page. Okay, Superintendent.
This is a update for the board and for the community at large of the concept of the Accountability Office, and it is accompanied by the position description for a executive director. I've asked Dr. Fulcher and his team to review the various options that have been brought forward, and he's finalized the proposal and brought it tonight for board consideration.
Right, thanks. Just give a brief overview of the work done on this to date. At the June 8th board meeting, Trustee Jackson presented an alternate proposal for the Accountability Office, and that can be found in your report. You actually have a report in your packet in Appendix 1C. It was briefly reviewed by the board members, also requested that staff do some research of the proposal and provide feedback. So what I'd like to do is just give you a real brief quick overview of what the findings were to date.
And Joe, as you do that, if you're able to address some of David Page's questions.
Sure, I can do that right off the bat.
Okay.
There was a memorandum sent to the board on May 25th. Actually, it was a board report that was sent to all of you on May 25th that has a breakdown of the different departments, including some of the responsibilities inherent in those departments. The initial or the first department that's listed, the manager monitoring and accountability reporting, would be responsible for the LEA plan, also has some responsibility over SSC, coordinating and not coordinating but monitoring the plans that are developed at the school site, the SPSAs. So some of those responsibilities are listed in detail in that report that was provided on May 25th. And I can refer back to that for more information if necessary and make sure that Mr. Page gets a copy for his records. The proposal that Ms. Jackson presented called for 2 accountability directors that would report to the deputy superintendents. The directors would be responsible for assessment services, research and reporting, as well as the performance management and evaluation monitoring. there would be 10 fewer staff members in Ms. Jackson's proposal than in the proposal that was submitted by the MAC committee. Some of the key staffing differences between the two proposals include a planning analyst, there were administrative aides, supervising administrative assistant, clerk typist, research system analyst, and also the directors and executive director positions, 3 of those total. With the accountability directors reporting directly to the deputy superintendent, it's believed that the deputies have the potential to wield some unintended influence on the work of that office. Although we can't quite question the motives of the deputy supes, and I'm sure they'll be well-intentioned, removing the possibility and perception of any undue influence on the accountability office is crucial, we feel. So in order to present a fair and untainted account, it's important for this new accountability office to report directly to the superintendent. By being a direct report, the potential filters that exist couldn't inadvertently impact the work of this new proposed department. So its leadership must be able to independently monitor the system-wide requirements and compliance and directly report the findings, good and bad, to the superintendent without fear of any reprisals or retribution. Ms. Jackson's proposal also has the potential to save the district an additional $900,000. It's believed that significant, and although that does exist, we believe that technical and legal risk could result if this model is implemented. I believe the term that was used at the last board meeting was exposure. And we want to make sure that whatever proposal is selected by the board, in spite of the reductions, budget and staff reductions, that we have staffing that's adequate, we have funding that certainly meets the needs, and we don't have the fear that work completion and legal matters could be compromised. Certainly don't want that to be the case. It's also generally believed that some established deadlines for mandated reporting could be compromised with the CalPADS, OCR, CBEDS, or there could be additional deadlines that would be hard to meet, difficult to meet. Other tasks that could be at jeopardy include the interpretation of state, federal, and local policies that are necessary for the use of Title I funding, the district's interface or the liaison with the district advisory committee, and the annual development of the local education agency. There's also an obligation of the district to provide some support to schools in PI status. For instance, schools in the second and third year of PI are required to receive some support from a district office. The hope is that superintendents, deputy supes, area supes will provide some support, but there should also be an unbiased, objective group working with these group of principals and teachers as well. And at step 4, we have restructuring plans that need to be rewritten and written. At level 5, of course, schools will need to develop and implement some type of implementation plan to work with the students and staff at that school. So again, with all those things in mind, we feel that it's important for the Accountability Office to have the freedom to share in an accurate and adequate way what has been observed at the schools, provide some types of recommendations to school sites without, again, fear of stepping on toes or reprisals, and also should report directly for many of the reasons mentioned to the superintendent. And I'll stop there and answer or entertain any other questions that you may have on the makeup of this proposed department.
Okay, why don't we get a motion in a second, and then we can...
Move approval.
Second.
Okay. Any questions or discussion? Ms. Jackson?
Okay.
Comments here?
Certainly, I understand that a few months ago when we were at a workshop, we looked at proposing this department. But again, I refer to even a memo that I received as early as this morning about our current financial status. And even though you may plan to do something, if the financial status changes, you need to be able to modify. And certainly, I also talk a lot about accountability, and I've been saying it for a long time. And accountability didn't necessarily mean having a whole other department to do accountability. Accountability meant that the people that had a job was doing their job and someone was holding them accountable. So I don't think that what I'm hearing right now is going to put anybody in a position to hold people accountable. I think that the people that are in this office are monitoring and they're talking to, but I think we have to get to the point that the people in positions, deputy superintendents, area superintendents, and their like, are held accountable by the evaluation piece. And forming a whole separate another arm does not do that. Again, allows for the pointing of fingers. Now, again, I'll go back and say, because of the economic crisis that we have, and even as early as this morning, we were reminded again that we need to look at how we're spending our dollars. I don't think this is the right time to do this. And the comment about the deputy soup's ulterior motives, let's talk about they all come through the superintendent anyway. They all come through somebody anyway, and anyone at any level, whether it's the principal level, the area soup level, deputy soup level, can all have ulterior motives, okay? But we do have an area that goes out and review things. That's called our internal auditors. We do have those people in line. And so my concern, again, is that we can't afford, we need to find as many cuts as we possibly can right now. We need to streamline as much as we possibly can right now. The reduction of 10 people might not be palatable right now, but we're going to have to do it now or do it next year, and I think it would help our budget better if we do it now and people know what their responsibilities are, okay? So for those reasons, I cannot support this.
The difference in the price of the proposals, or the cost of the two proposals, is about $900,000. There is a department, it's performance management and evaluation, that would be in part responsible for researching, establish, and currently utilize performance indicators, as well as doing some program and policy evaluations of other districts. There's also a hands-on approach, I guess you could call it, for the director of, or the executive director of this department, with the ability to reach out and secure support from other departments. So if an auditor is necessary to come in and get some job accomplished, they could do that in this department.
Okay, your report is great, but just let me say this. The idea of reaching out and pulling other people in, our district is lean and mean. Mm-hmm. When you just can't be calling principals in every other week to be on committees and or teachers and or other staff. They have responsibilities to do in the jobs that they're at that we've already reduced the people around them, so their workload has already increased. Okay, so but my point is that your presentation was wonderful. I understand it. I'm just voicing my differences as a board member. That's all. Thank you.
The only question that I had, Joe, was about the question that David Page asked about who basically holds the I-21 program accountable under our structure. I don't know if that's something that you can address, or superintendent.
There is a dotted line that occurs from the last department there, as you can see on the end, research and reporting, to IT. So some of the functions would certainly be shared. There'd be collaboration between the two departments. This department's, its new office, would be in part responsible for overseeing the fine efforts of just about every department in our district. So compliance would be measured in large part by working through this department. Other issues that would be recorded and measured include the work production, the level of compliance that department is exhibiting. So there's a dotted line function, but they certainly wouldn't be responsible for what happens in IT or I-21.
All right, no further questions or comments. Please vote. Passes 4-1. Thank you, Joe. Okay, on to item A6, the classification items. Superintendent.
President Barra, this is the, let me get my notes here. for Sandra Hueso coming forward to essentially update for the classification items, and in this case here, I believe it's position description that we have.
Good evening, everyone. What we have before you is a recommendation to establish the Executive Director of Accountability Office. This would work in conjunction with your previous approval to establish the office, and by the same token is the abolishment of a previously established position. Basically, what we have is a job description that it was pretty much reflective of the feedback that we receive in regards to what the expectations would be for this level of position. With your approval of this job description, Human Resources would move forward in advertising to fill this assignment.
Move approval.
Yeah, Mr. DeBeck.
Okay. Considering the testimony of Mr. Page in the job description, we're approving the job description as it stands, or we're just approving the position?
Well, we would be asking you for also, if possible, to approve the job description. If there any feedback, then what we would do is go back and revise it. But at this point, we would be asking for approval.
To be sensitive to the Title I and the whole issue around that project, I'd like to see the kind of content in the Executive Director Accountability Office's job description that includes some responsibility for that in a way that satisfies, I mean, the law requires certain things that should be in the administration of, for example, Title I. Okay, then it might just be this person is designated as the official district person for accountability for Title I. That might be this job description statement. But since it's not in here, and I don't believe it is.
Page 2.
All right, where do you see it?
It says, page 2, about 1, 2, 3, fourth paragraph says, direct federal and state centralized service and programs in all Title I district schools.
Yeah, but that didn't say direct Title I.
Well, I do think, John, in the opening, under basic function, we've tried to keep this as broad-based and flexible. We have the opening words, direct, coordinate, and oversee all aspects of district program monitoring evidence of accountability and compliance to district, federal, state, county, and agency-wide policies. We try to keep this as broad as we can.
Maybe the magic word would be designated as the official contact for Title I activities for the federal government. Getting at is there's got to be somebody that signs off these things, and if this is that first, these are collective.
I think maybe the updates.
Is this a new one?
It's got changes on it.
All right. Where is the? Anyway, what I'm getting at is if you think that this meets the requirements of the federal government's audit of Title I, then I'm not going to argue with you over it. If it doesn't, I want it to have it in there. Okay, now can you tell me that it meets all the requirements of Title I as the authority for the district to sign off on Title I?
Based on what is written right here, the person that would be pretty much in charge of those programs would be able to sign off. The job description does include enough information for us to be able to, at some point, be further specific with regards to what is it that exactly they would be responsible for. So I do believe that the statements that are currently in this job description would cover that.
In fact,
revisions could happen, yes.
If I could reassure Mr. DeBeck, I mean, it talks about direct interface and collaboration with the DAC. It talks about direct administration of the Title I services for all institutions, private, public. It does talk about being responsible for ensuring SPSAs are carefully managed throughout the districts. I mean, it's a broad document, but it does cover all what I would say are the components at the highest level for managing.
Well, in my experience, and I have done projects for districts other than this one, as well as this one, in direct contact with federal authorities, and they usually expect a person to be designated as official director of that particular program. And it usually has to be said in their job description or in their title. This doesn't say Director Title I. It says Director of Accountability Executive Director Accountability Office, and it doesn't have as a byproduct or anyone under this person as being the direct director of Title I. This also happens in vocational education and other federal programs. What they want is somebody that has the authority to be contacted and be in charge of the program. If you say it's right, then it's right. I'm not going to argue with you. I'm just saying that's my experience for over a number of years, both on my job experience as well as my membership on a board. You believe it's right, and it turns out it's audited and it's not right, I guess I'll have somebody to hold accountable.
Well, we could certainly go to a middle ground. We'll write plain language in there designated the
that's what I was getting at.
district interface or contact for Title I programs.
That's what I was getting at.
Okay.
Thank you, Ms. Wessler. Okay, on to item A7, the public hearing on categorical flexibility transfers and authorization to use funds for flexible categorical programs. Attendance? You've got a speaker on.
Yes. Oh.
Why don't we take the speaker first? Leticia Munguia.
Leticia Munguia, CSC Labor Relations Representative for the Operation Support Services Bargaining Unit. Good evening, Superintendent Koba, President Barrera, and board members. As I speak to you on this agenda item, I almost want to speak to you in conjunction with A7 and A8 regarding the budget. I think there's a couple of things that I wanted to make sure that I highlight before your discussion begins as it relates to transferring funds and dollars from one fund to the other. At this point in time, the OSS unit is yet to ratify the 5-day takeaway, 5-day furlough, 5-day reduction in work year, which has an enormous impact on our workers. As you know, half of my unit is the lowest paid workers in the district, our food service workers. They work less than 3.5 hours a day, and some of them are working 2 hours a day. So they're not even making enough money to buy a bus pass, but yet again, they're taking an extraordinary amount of dollars every month out of their checks. And I understand, they understand. Not sure where we will be with the TA next Wednesday, the 7th, but I want to ask that as you make these decisions a couple of things, and this has been in our efforts in getting out the vote and talking to our membership, there's a couple things that I've been hearing from our members that I want you to know. The one piece is, how can folks be getting raises when we're having to give up money? First question. Second question, how can people be getting reclasses when we're losing money? Another question I think these are very valid questions. And third and final, how can we be creative? How can the district in this budget time be creating science experiments when we should be very careful of every single dollar? Today I talked to a worker who has a medical condition that necessitates 8 prescriptions a month. And the proposal was to go up $10, correct? So $80 just on prescription alone. Already in the negative as it relates to the 5-day furlough. So I want to have you understand from the perspective of our workers, right? The economic impact that this means when you're making decisions about creating departments, giving people raises, creating new positions. I sure hope you can justify that. When we sat here on that Saturday morning and you were being asked to rescind raises, I know that it's not a popular decision to make, but it's not popular when you're asking people to give up 5 days of work a year. And we understand, because what we were told is that it was going to be a shared sacrifice by all. Now that really needs to be true to the true spirit of that language. And when we see folks who are making more, gaining more, it makes it uncomfortable. The last thing I want to say is we need to do right by our classified workers. The warehouse settlement needs to be implemented, and our locker room attendants need to be respected. We've been trying to bring those two matters to a closure, and I ask for your leadership, Mr. Barrera. Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Koba, do you want to just kick this off?
I have Mr. Stover who will speak to this.
Good evening. This item is a new item for you that you have not had to approve in the past. The state of California just informed us of a new regulation that they're putting on us for you to basically affirm what was done back in June related to the development of the budget and the identification of certain funds as Tier 3 categorical. This is a compliance requirement that is brand new for you and for us. And Debbie Foster has been working with the state in gaining an understanding on behalf of the district, and I'm going to ask her to explain it to you a little bit more. Thank you. Thank you.
Good evening. As we brought this forward, our initial understanding from communication from CDE that we received last year, as you remember in 08-09, the state made mid-year adjustments, and as they did that, they put in place some categorical flexibility. At that time, we took about a 15% reduction on many of our programs, and at that same time, they also reclassified about 40 of our restricted state resources as unrestricted. The guidance at that point said you needed to bring that forward to the board, and it was appropriate to do that through the budget adoption process. We did that in June of last year, and then we've brought updates throughout the year. Recently, as Phil mentioned, we've gotten updates from CDE. The May revise emphasized you actually have to have that as part of a separate board item. So that's what you have before you tonight in a different format that you've seen before, but just to confirm and make it transparent that we have been using the funds for that are now Tier 3. As far as the state sees all these resources, they see them as unrestricted. Some districts don't keep them separate like we have, as reported on this report, but so that we can still monitor how we're using these unrestricted dollars, we've kept them in separate resources.
But this isn't any intention to remove this funding. We're not eliminating GATE, we're not eliminating,
No.
arts and music, we're not, okay. So.
And one thing I should mention also is that without bringing this forward before the end of the fiscal year, we could be in jeopardy of losing all this funding. So it's just to make sure that we bring this forward. And now that we have this information from CDE as well as from the county office, our goal is to bring that to you earlier in the budget process.
Move approval.
Got a motion and a second. Got a motion and a second.
Comment?
Ms. Jackson and Mr.
Okay, because the concern that I have is that you're supposed to have a public hearing and then it comes back for board approval, and it's like we're having the public hearing and the board approval all at the same meeting, so therefore the public doesn't get to give input, and so I'm not quite sure when you were notified about this, because and I get very concerned when we have to do things at the last minute, and we have to do it. If we don't do it, then the whole world falls apart, and we're going back to those days. And I really hope that we aren't going back to the time that we would get things at the last, June 29th, and if we don't do it, then we certainly can't move forward. And then just on the sheet itself, can you briefly explain what these numbers mean? And so I think, and just help me out here, you're saying that from the first area deferred maintenance appropriation, we had $3.9 million, and we received that, or we moved that out of a category of monies. What exactly does that mean to us, please?
Thank you. The first column, our financial accounting department provided that, and that's our new funding in each one of these categories as if it was still coming to us as restricted. The next column says that we actually kept that intact for that specific program use. The first example of that would be the KC on this schedule. And the last column there reflects everything that was used for just the general fund balancing of the budget for 2009-10.
Yeah. My first one doesn't say Casey. My first one said first maintenance.
First one that.
Maybe mine is different.
It says A7. It says A7.
Mine says A7. My first one is deferred maintenance.
You are correct. The first line item is deferred maintenance. I was referring to the first.
Columns. I only have one financial.
2, 3, 4, 5 columns.
Well, 3 columns of dollars.
Well, geez,
This is what's
this is what drives me wild. It does. It really does. I mean, I got this agenda, and then I got this one. Now, see, this...
Oh, I'm saying corrected.
That's entirely different. It's still a problem.
Okay.
The first column, the data, is still the same. We just added 2 clarifying columns to the right. So the new funding is still the $101 million. We just wanted to make sure it was clear on the second 2 columns.
Okay, so thank you. So my question would be, I think I have this correctly. Last year, at the beginning of 09-10, we received $3.9 million for deferred maintenance, okay? And we transitioned that to general education.
Correct.
Okay. All right. And then where it says program, we just kept it for the program specifically. We didn't transfer any of it. So the amount in the first column is the total amount that we received?
Correct.
Okay. And it says new funding, but have we received this money before?
Yes.
Okay.
We received in 9-10, the reduction on the base allocation was about 15%.
So this is new funding amount.
Yes.
That'll be easy for me. So the new funding amount, very good. All right. I'm done for now. Thank you.
Sure. Okay. Tier 3, isn't it a single amount of money, like the bottom line, $101,766,000? Isn't that the allocation you get? And then the distribution of the Tier 3 money is the lines that you have described. So every single case, we had the option of identifying of the 101 rounded off millions how we were going to spend it. And then you called it new funding, and so therefore it's listed down this column. So now I'm trying to figure out why then you have a column that says program use, and then you have and I'm going to pick the one for Cassie, that says 407,000 was what we allocated out of the 9-10 new funding. Now then, in program use, is that 407,000 the amount we actually used of the budget, or is it the amount we're allocating for a future budget?
That's the amount that was allocated in the 09-10 operating budget.
So then, if I wanted to go down this column and without going to each individual item, and I look down at the bottom, I have a $59 million figure, so there's a gap of $42 million.
So the $42 million is in the last column. That was what was used for general purposes and what we brought forward to the board in June of last year to help balance the budget.
Okay. So that basically when you bring that money forward, that's taken from the programs that were identified. For example, if I use GATE, is a number 0342, which is down, where the first blank, I guess, one of the blanks toward the end. We had an allocation of once upon a time or sometime of $14 million and of $315, and we used it all for program use for that particular program, right?
For the GATE for 03242, the allocation was approximately 8.8, and they actually lump all the TIG.
One line down.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, the answer is yes. We used it 100% for the instructional materials TIG, the $2 million.
Okay, but what I'm trying to get at is the differences here, all right? For example, I guess I did look at the wrong line. A GATE TBIG was $8 million, then there's program use was $7 million, and then there's a gap of $1 million some.
Correct.
All right. What happened to that million sum? It just went to any kind of general education use?
That went to the general fund.
So basically that was a reduction in GATE.
What we did with the GATE, that would be the GATE teacher allocation. So we fully funded the GATE teacher allocation.
But we didn't fund the supplies and books or the consultants or whatever they use it for.
That's actually in another budget line.
Yeah, I understand. But, so basically if we're looking down this general purpose column, that's money that's been taken from the TIG program and placed in a general fund use.
Right. Correct.
Which is not the category of which it was originally used for.
Right. Correct.
All right. So if I was a program manager and I looked at this, I could say, well, in the case of dropout recovery, there was $1,000 used, but I only got 45, and so there was $10 million taken for other purposes.
Right.
Right.
10,000, yes.
So then why do we have to vote on it since it's already happened?
Because it requires public disclosure that this is what's happened. We've done it in other forums, budget adoption and budget updates throughout the year, but it's required to have its own separate item.
Well, I'm sorry to make you laugh, but the point I'm getting at is, in other words, what we're doing is retroactively approving the fact that we stole money from these TIG categories and put it in the general fund. And that's the purpose of this hearing and the actual vote. Is that correct?
It's to confirm what we've already brought forward in a separate board item.
It confirms what we've done.
Correct.
All right, and what we've done is what I described, and you describe it differently, but that's still what happened is certain programs lost money from their Category 3 TIG funds, and it was transferred over to general fund. And what we're now doing is saying, that's okay, we agree, because we've already done it.
Have.
So it's a ratification, so why argue? Okay.
I just want to, to me, I understand that some of the silliness of the state bureaucracy, but the issue here that's interesting, it's like an audit. And we were given flexibility last year with our categorical funds. As they cut our funds, they said, we're going to cut your funds, but we're going to let you move things around a little bit according to what you decide your priorities are. And this is a useful audit in the sense that, for example, with Casey, we received $407,000 and we spent all of that on that. And then there are other cases where we moved all the money over. There are other cases where we used part of the money. This was what we already did, I understand. Through the budget process, we decided just because we had flexibility didn't mean that we took all the money away from all these funds. We took some of the money away, and this is just an accounting of what we already did, correct? Okay.
All right, we've got a motion in a second. Mr. Cook.
Yeah. Not to slow it down, Prosper, but just to help the board out and myself. This is a limited flexibility for a few years. Last year, the state didn't require you to call it out in this specific decision. This year, they did. They do that occasionally, and we're going to have to do this again next year. I think over the course of the last several months, we've talked about moving money around. This is all general fund and restricted as it sits today. In a couple of years, it won't be. It will go back. So we're just trying to simply report it out. Now, let me ask the question so that we continue to do this in a timely fashion. Why are we doing it today? Could we have done this at the first reading or at some other point in time? And I'm not trying to put anybody on the spot, just so that it can be clearly articulated.
We were just notified of the requirement within the last few weeks. We wanted to make sure we fully understood the requirement and made sure that this met all the obligations and to make sure we weren't at risk of funding. Staff's intention is to bring this to you much earlier in the 10-11 board meetings, and so we hope to have that back to you for the 10-11 in July or August.
And last year, you didn't even see this.
There was no requirement.
It wasn't a part of the requirements.
Okay, so which is going to be my question then for the 10-11, because it says through 12-13. So we're not approving this for 12 from now to 12-13. No. You're going to bring us back another one of these in July or August of this year for how we're going to spend, or we're going to take money away from for next year. Yes. Because, again, my comments this morning, I have a hard time taking all the deferred maintenance money away.
Yeah, so I'm going to do a little conjecture on why they're asking for this. The people that gave us flexibility that were also advocates for these different programs in Sacramento, those are, I'll call them Gateistas and all the others that have certain views, those people are going to tabulate these up and down the state. And some legislator is going to look and say, look what happened to Gate. Look what happened to, whatever. And they're going to get back at us the next time there's legislation, and they're going to pass specialized legislation with no flexibility, and they'll do it just because we did what we did. They're auditing our flexibility is what they're doing. So I understand what they're up to. And we're complying with their questions, which is, how did you take this money and use it this year? And then those folks up there that are busy passing laws are going to say, we didn't like what you did, so we're going to fix it. Okay? So we got to answer the questions. They're asking the questions. But the result of our answers are going to be probably a problem for us.
On behalf of the Gateistas, I am hoping somebody does take a tally of how all these programs have lost and is keeping track up in Sacramento. But I think you're giving them far too much credit. I hate to
But see, this
I
is...
find it hard to believe Sacramento's that smart, but maybe.
Oh, yeah, they're smarter than you think they are.
I have one more tiny question. The resource description, where did those come from? Are those manufactured here?
Yes, the state actually reclassified these, and as the state sees them, they're unrestricted. But so we could manage and monitor how we were spending those. We took the description from the restricted resource and used an identifier with the unrestricted resources. So we've taken the same title and name that we had in the restricted category and reused it under the unrestricted.
So there's a Chief Business Officer Training Program. If I go to the state and look at the state, I will find that there's a Chief Business Officer Training Program?
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Under TIG.
Yes.
All right.
There is a sanctioned program.
All right. Very good.
Okay, we've got a motion and a second. Please
Let's
vote.
hope so.
Okay, passes 4-1. Okay, item A8. This is our public hearing and adoption of the 2010-11 district budget and our resolution to certify fiscal solvency for the subsequent 2 years.
Okay, I'd like to ask our interim CFO, Phil Stover, to come to the podium. And this is, as you recognize, the second read in the adoption decision-making.
Thank you. Good evening. I have no speech for you tonight. I just have 3 words. Number 1, I'd like to give a word of thanks. A word of thanks to the finance staff for the excellent cooperation and job that they have done in this budget process. Many of them are here tonight. Why don't you all stand up? Budget, finance. Be proud. Be proud. Be proud. They have worked long and hard and have taught me some new big words that I've enjoyed learning very, very much. Secondly, I'd like to
Some
give
of which you can probably repeat publicly.
yeah, that's true. That's true. And they love pizza. Secondly, a word of appreciation. I'd like to give a word of appreciation to you as a board for the process that you began back in October when we all met together back then and sticking through all of our different processes and methodologies for trying to do this in a manner that, although very, very difficult, has reason to it and that we can look to as a true process, identifying priorities and things that we absolutely must maintain. And thirdly, a word of caution to you that we soon have to do this again. We have to begin over again for the challenges. This is not a situation where we can breathe a sigh of relief and say the challenge is behind us. We must progress on forward and do this again very, very shortly. Before I begin going through just a few of these slides to tell you some things that have changed from when we presented them to you last Tuesday, I would just want to update you on the budget book itself. You should be receiving tomorrow an executive summary of the budget book. We had a situation where our chief technology guru for all things related to budget books decided to go play softball and broke his foot and leg in 5 places. And that put us back a few days, which is nothing compared to what Jeff is going through right now with his cast. But we will anticipate having an executive summary of the book ready for you tomorrow. Very, very quickly, I'll go through some things on the slide I want to highlight for you. We told you last week that we had good news for the trans process, where we had received the MIG-1 rating from Moody's at the bottom there. I will also tell you that yesterday morning we were successful in selling our trans notes in their entirety. It was not an easy process. 2 reasons for that. In fact, yesterday, over the course of time between 9 in the morning and 11 in the afternoon, we had 11 in the morning, those 2 hours, we had multiple calls with the underwriters, the desks in New York City, who were working very hard for us to sell our notes. They had 2 observations for us. Number 1, the California market. The California market is very, very slow right now as far as those who would buy these kinds of notes. They are afraid of us and the risk involved. And number 2, that they were concerned with the amount of liquidity and what they call coverage of our notes that we had in place. They would like to see more than 100% of the dollars in accounts set aside, or not set aside, but in accounts that we could use in case of an emergency to pay for those kind of notes. 23, I sent you, or Bill sent you a note earlier, I think, indicating that we really only had 4 or 5 out of 23 to 25 agencies accept our credit and purchase our notes. The good news is that they did, and they did purchase them, and we stand before you this evening. Bill signed the documents yesterday, and we will anticipate receiving the funds July 14th or 15th, I believe, and that will obviously help us tremendously going forward. What we're asking you to do is adopt the budget and the budget resolution for the county that you have before you. You just approved the Tier 3 usage agenda item, and then on July 13th we will be bringing back to you a resolution for the one-time use of the sale of property proceeds, and so that will be the final phase in this budget process for the 10-11 school year. The chart here, you saw this last week in a less defined form. We've added onto this capital funds and other funds. It reemphasizes the fact that our total funds are down 7%, and that we have indeed lost a significant amount of money. The only really stable fund that we have is all other funds, which are our child development, cafeteria, our liability, self-insurance funds, workers' comp funds, those kinds of funds that are relatively stable. There's no changes here. We showed you the emphasis, the impact here of our staffing on our overall budget as it increases, and that leads me to a new chart you have not seen. This one. We put this together this week, and I believe it's a very significant little chart. It shows you for total general fund, total restricted fund, and total unrestricted fund, the increase of the percentage of our total funding due to salaries and benefits. From 2009-10, in our total general fund, 88.3, we're projecting for 12-13 that's 91.8. Our restricted from 85.1 to 91. Our unrestricted from 90.5 all the way up to 92.2. And as you know, the majority of our challenges, budget-wise, we face in the unrestricted part of our funding. And that's where you see an increase from 90.5 to 92.2, which obviously, as we stated last week, puts tremendous stress on us in identifying further cuts and reductions that are not personnel related. I would think this would be an excellent metric for the council. I've thought about talking to Mr. Carlson to see if he could come develop a metric for us of all the council districts to see if they're facing the same situation, so that we would know whether this is an anomaly or part of a pattern that we see in large urbans, where over this time period that the expenses have become increasingly related to personnel.
I can tell you in California that certainly holds true, but nationally it'd be interesting to see.
Yeah. I think we will request that of them, and maybe they can provide us some information there.
More significant is the jump between 9-10 and 10-11. If you look at the gain in restricted, we basically, if you look at that figure alone, you gain 4.5% in restricted in salaries, which means you must have done some shifting.
Yeah.
And that
to solve our some of our deficit situation, we have indeed shifted personnel from unrestricted to restricted funds, which creates a bigger jump on the restricted side by itself, and that leads to, and 2 years from now, for the first time, we had a restricted deficit. We believe we have that solved now, but we have to watch that restricted fund as well, especially as we put pressure on it by shifting funds in that sense. That's correct.
But even more, the question is, how the people that handle the restricted funds view that. We have been able to move things around to satisfy our own needs, but the people who send us the restricted money may not agree. And that test has yet to be met. Isn't that true?
Certainly. If we look at this slide, general fund restricted, multi-year, slide number 11. Slide number 11 in your packet, you can certainly see some dramatic things happening with our restricted funds. Yeah. Beginning balances, 9-10 projected, 10-11 budget, 11-12 projection, 12-13 projection. Significant decline in our restricted budget as we have so much pressure on our unrestricted dollars. And as you see, as the decline goes, it's going to leave smaller and smaller beginning balances, and we will have to take more and more reductions. If nothing externally happens to bring us more revenue, we'll be forced to take more reductions on the unrestricted side.
But knowing that, would you say that this is prudent?
I would say it's our only choice we've had to do this at this point, given the fact of the deficits and the choices that we have from a budget perspective on how to solve that problem. But it does lead clearly to the conclusion that we will have to, in future years, make reductions directly out of our unrestricted.
Well, that sort of happened to people who overfinanced on their houses too. So when you get, you're sitting in this thing, well, we'll solve the problem later, we'll solve the problem later, we'll solve the problem later, and all of a sudden you can't make your payments and your house is gone. That's not exactly what I want the school district to do.
Right.
And so savings seem to me, that maybe some of our solutions need to be revisited.
Well, in future years, we certainly will have to again, look at the unrestricted side as the restricted side becomes, as it decreases, and that chart on page 11 certainly is a clear picture of that. The other thing we have to look at is clearly demonstrated on this slide, where you see at 1213 we're projecting a $70 million deficit, and what that highlights is that if the reductions we make next year are not ongoing reductions, if they are not reductions that are repeatable, replicable in future years, that number will be $221 million. You might want to write that in if you'd like to. At the bottom of the 1213 projection, that number could be as high as $221 million. And again, we're making assumptions here. We have to make assumptions through this whole process. And one of the assumptions we're making in these projections is that there will be no increased revenue from the state, that nothing good will happen to us, which could certainly happen as we go along.
Real estate
but it's clearly a $70 million deficit in 1213 if we don't have ongoing reductions from that point on. And then I already showed you chart 11 where it shows the impact on our restricted side. Page 13, we've added the little line there at the bottom that says an 11 and 12 and 1213. The projections that I've just shown you already include the $128 million proposed deficit solution. So those are built in. Last week they were not built in. Now we have built them in. If we go to slide 16, there's a change on slide 16 where we've added another year. We've carried this out another year, and we're showing you the same number I just talked about briefly earlier, 1213, where if the reductions that we make for the 11-12 year are all carryover funds, then the deficit declines, is reduced in the 12-13 year to $70.1 million, which is the lowest since 07-08, when we really began a process. I believe we started that in January, February. Bill may remember better than I do, where it was a mid-year cut in 07-08, but I think that was mid-year. And So it comes down to 70.1, which isn't good news again, but it is the lowest we've seen, assuming that the cuts are ongoing in the next several years. Now, here's a chart that is a new chart for you that we've given you because we had some questions last week, and we've tried to give you some further information here. We're looking at 0708 revenue limit funding per pupil of $5,787. We're looking at this coming year, the year that begins this week, of $4,957. These are net adjustment down 14% in the 3-year delta that we're showing you here, year to year to year. So we're down 14% in those years in our basic revenue limit funding. And the little comment there in black, in the blue section there, a fully funded COLA for 10-11. If we had a fully funded COLA, that would be $6,371 instead of the $4,957 that you see here. That's a loss of $1,415 per ADA. If with a budgeted ADA of $110,000, if we had that money, it would be $155,000 in additional revenue to us.
Million.
I'm sorry, million. I said
that would be nice.
Yeah, million.
Just
we
a
take
question.
$155,000.
Just a question, because this year we were looking, and the year we're going into it, a revenue limit reduction of $200 and some dollars.
Right.
So how is it that it shows it being even from 9-10 to 10-11?
Here comes our revenue guru.
She's going to bring it with her.
For 9-10, we had a $252, almost $253 per ADA reduction that was supposed to be one time. They've now made it ongoing, and we're projecting it to be $245 per ADA. So that has
so we had a one time last year, and then that one time ended up happening
again. And now that one time
again.
we're projecting to be now as ongoing.
Okay. Just this once.
So the rest, again, we said last week to you that there was a $15.7 million, or several weeks ago, in our general fund for 12-13. Based on what we've built in to the budget projections, and these are projections, this is, 12-13 is only a projection, but based on what we've built in there, we do find that general fund restricted challenge has been mitigated, and we'll be okay there. So we go back, and you've seen all these slides before. We have not changed anything related to what could happen with the public policy impacts. That would certainly be tremendously helpful. These are the steps. Tonight we're asking you to adopt the budget. We must submit it to the county. Our year-end closes, and we begin the process of looking at our unaudited actuals. We do have a budget development retreat on the 16th that Bill has asked us all to attend to begin strategizing for the future year. So that's why I say to you, and my word of caution is we have to do this all over again, and that process for staff begins July 16th with a retreat of all academics, all of Bill's cabinet, finance people, HR people, to try and put together a great path forward for next year. I think you will find that we will want to engage you early on in the year in working on potential planning, solution for resolving our conflict as we go on, and we will do it again, beginning quickly. Thank you.
Okay, so can we get a single motion to adopt the 10-11 budget and the resolution to the county?
So moved.
Can we get a second? I will second the motion. Okay, any comment or discussion?
I will speak.
Yeah.
First of all, I want to thank the staff for all their due diligence and hard work. I know they've been putting in a lot of hours. I still have my concerns about the use of certainly the Title I funds, and I have my concerns about other items. So I will not be supporting the budget, but I know the staff has worked hard, and I want to thank them for all their hard work. It's not a reflection of your work, just I'm concerned about some numbers. Thank you.
Okay, with no further comment, please vote. Nakamura?
I'm having a hard time with this. I'm really struggling as far as approving this.
Okay, well, we've got a big problem, folks. So we have 3 board members that are not voting to adopt the budget.
It's in the hands of the 3 board members who voted against it. There's nothing we can do. We've painstakingly gone through all of these cuts up to this point.
The difference, there's 2 things that were in the motion. You put them together, I'm voting no. You separate them, I might change my vote.
Okay.
But I'm not going to be railroaded into voting for certification when I don't agree with the strategies we've taken. And, I certainly have a position on, we got to have a budget. I'm not going to, while I didn't agree with some of the processes and the way we went about it, and I think that we ended up sticking it to people we shouldn't have, and we've done a number of things that I don't agree with, I'm not going to vote against a budget that's the majority approved. But I'm certainly not going to vote for positive certification. So you put them together, it's not my fault.
I will make a motion to approve the budget.
I'll change my vote.
Right,
just
so we'll
in the interest of going forward, go back to the original motion.
Okay. All right, the original motion, again, is to both adopt the 10-11 budget and to approve the resolution to the county to certify fiscal solvency. Please vote.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Nakamura.
You're welcome.
Okay, on to item A9. This is the resolution declaring the board commitment to develop a budget restoration plan.
So moved.
Second.
Motion is second. Any comment?
Yeah, I'd like to comment on this. While the words are very nicely put together and the intent is good, I think the public is probably more interested in a flat list, an actual flat list of, we all know all this. Yeah. We know how bad it is. And, but what we need is, a flat list, and, what I would put at the top of that would be the Title I issue, that needs to be resolved, and I'd put that at the top of the list. I think all of us are concerned about whether or not we're on firm footing with that, but, and a number of other items, but I think that's a discussion for the entire board, and, I'm really simple. When I've got a list of stuff that I need, I keep it on the wall in front of me, on my desk, and, there's a part of me wants to post it on the wall here that we just keep it up permanently, because these things slide away from us and they don't get restored, and priorities, things start slipping in, if the economy should happen to get better, or, and the actual intent of the board as representatives of our community and our society somehow gets lost in the expediency of the administering, this district. So I'll certainly vote for this, but I think that we have to have a flat list. We've got to have a meeting.
Do you want to make an amendment then to the motion to include a list?
Yes, I would. I'd like the superintendent. I'd like to direct the superintendent to start a flat list, and that we have a meeting very similar to what we've had before. In this economic time, I'm not sure that anything's going to get restored, but we're certainly going to have to look at this as we prioritize and reprioritize over and over again. One of the reasons I was willing to go ahead and authorize this is, while I did not agree with many of the decisions, I do know how diligently staff has worked and how hard they have taken this budget apart and put it back together again and again, trying to find the money to support the needs of the community. And while I didn't agree with a lot of those, but anyway, yes, I'd like to add that addendum, and then also have a meeting or 2 or 6.
Oh,
okay.
Yeah. All right. Whatever.
Mr. DeBeck, is that correct?
Well, if you think about the process we went through to get the cuts, and then you reversed it, you might have an understanding of how long it's going to take to get a list of items to restore. Because the same arguments that we had over which ones came first or second and all the dots we went through is another whole argument. The reason why I can support this is it shows an intent to restore. I don't think that we could come up to a consensus right now, and that we even have the time to set priorities on the restoration, on the what-ifs. It might be easier if when the money came in, we looked at it and said, what's our first priority for restoration? You see what I'm getting at? In other words...
Yeah, but John, you and I have been on the board long enough, and we know how this happens. When the restoration happens, it slithers on in, and the intent of the board gets lost, and new initiatives are brought before us, and there's all these bells and whistles, and somehow we forget what it is, all the people and all the programs that we have left behind.
No, I'm not going to disagree with you on that, but my point is it's still a political process. It takes 3 votes, and so why screw around with it now and prescribe for a future board what they might do? See, it happens. I mean, if this board wants to commit to the votes of previous boards on priorities,
I just don't want.
Then I can agree with that. But see, I've seen this board in many times, not just this board, but this board that I've sat on, reverse decisions that were made previously in terms of long-range planning and all the rest on the whim of a moment.
And I completely actually agree with you. I'm not trying to tie anyone's hands, and it would be foolish to suggest that I have that ability to do it. But without this exercise, and without the discipline of going through this, I think that any prioritization will be lost.
I don't think that we'll be gaining on the next year's budget cuts while we go through the arguments about the restorations. I don't think we've got the luxury of that to do at all. I think the luxury is, it might be hypothetical, we want to restore. I can vote on that. But what I can't vote on is knowing that I've got to find $70 or $80 million next year, that I'm going to sit down in a happy little session where I decide all the things I'm going to restore when I know I'm going to have to cut anyway. It's just not, to me, it's just a waste of our time.
Dr. Evans.
Period.
My understanding, and I completely agree with you about you don't want to just pass something that just sits there and it's pretty words and too bad. My understanding of this, for us to have this resolution, is that we want to be, just like we looked at the list with the categorical funds. We said we were given flexibility. We were given $500,000 for this project. We used $100,000 of it flexible, but we're not going to forget that we were originally given $500,000 for that particular thing. And in terms of restoration, as opposed to us sitting here and having a big forum about this, the way I see it is we are directing the staff, who never has enough to do, starting on July 1st, maybe can wait after the weekend, to actually look at a plan that would be, in terms of a restoration plan, which would, and obviously we may be moving in the other direction, as Mr. DeBeck said, but a plan for us to stay even, this is what we need to do, for us to improve, this is what we need to do, and for us to work on our long-term goals, this is what we need to do.
Right.
We must not forget that, for example, if we have X number of custodians, which is this 20% below what we minimally need, we can't forget the fact that we're operating on a subpar basis. So there are many things we're operating subpar. We just need to get to that basic. We're just talking about getting to the minimal level, and then another level would be what we're doing for our long-term plan. But we always have to be able to point out, this is our plan of where we want the district to go in the next 10 years. We may, and we're obviously going this way right now, but we can't lose sight of where we want to get to in the meantime. So that to me is the purpose of having this restoration
Which is actually why
plan.
I want the flat list. I don't particularly, the prioritization of that, I think we can certainly, differ on that, I think we ought to at least take a stab at this.
Point of the list, Mr. Crowley,
Yeah.
What I think would be is an iterative process here. We could bring a list together and just see what you think of the list in terms of the format and completeness and what it is. And I think we work on that list. I don't think it's a one-time product for you. We just have to get ourselves focused on it.
Right.
We've got one public speaker on this item, Leticia. Yeah.
Yeah, just Leticia Muyo, Assessed Labor Rep. The address is on file. Obviously, speaking to the issue of restoration, a couple points that have been mentioned since I spoke on A7. First and foremost, it appears you may be having a budget workshop or some kind of priority discussion on your timeline that was on the board a minute ago for July the 16th. I sure hope that classified is considered, invited, and actually is a stakeholder in that discussion. We weren't mentioned, so that gives me a concern right away. I'm not sure what the intent behind that is, and I wanted to make sure that on the record you understand as a board that we hope that as you're making decisions of eliminations in the unrestricted side, that means classified, just in case anybody was concerned. When we have looked at situations involving restoration, you just took $3.9 million from a deferred maintenance. On June 1st, we had a collective presentation that went to you upstairs in room 2226 and told you that there's over 1,000 work orders in the hopper of work that our people have been told to stop working on because there isn't any money. Now I know why, because it was in a fund that was on hold and it was transferred. That's why. And there was a document that I sent to Mr. Macias, your prior CFO, asking as to why there was a slowdown in our work stoppage. I hope that you're connecting the dots of the direction that is being provided into the field. And for us, our concern is the kids are the ones who are being hurt by these decisions. The toilets aren't fixed. Repairs aren't done. The water fountains aren't clean. They're not issues like Mr. Evans, you just mentioned. The deficit in our custodians, the deficits in our landscapers, the deficit since you offered the SERP last June. I'm just trying to remind you of recent decision making that's all having a compounding effect.
No, that's exactly what we're after, but I'd also get after the fact that we're cutting 50% supplies.
I understand.
And that's, as far as materials for our kids. I don't want to lose sight of that. I don't want to lose sight of any of that.
So the only thing I also wanted to, I don't want to forget December of last year, Dr. Canny and the science committee that worked and put their sweat and tears into a report that came to the board has gone ignored. We saw gains in sciences. Yet again, you haven't implemented the recommendations that they've earmarked. I want you to pull that report out and work with us. And again, we saw gains in sciences. Why aren't we dedicating those dollars for improvement as Dr. Canny led that committee through great work? So we stand ready to work in the restoration and bringing these matters forward. I just want to make sure that the process is open and transparent and inclusive. Issues always are decided above and beyond the stakeholders that are really hurt by your decision making. So I ask Mr. Koba that you don't forget classified and that we're at the table, that each of the units has an opportunity to bring forward their perspective.
Thank you, Leticia. Okay, so we've got a motion and a second to adopt a resolution, but to include in it a list that'll be a work in progress as we go along. Okay, please vote. Great. Thank you, and with that, we will adjourn this meeting. Thank you. Thanks, everyone, for coming.